louder? How about that? No, okay. Welcome everybody to Claiming the Gift of Humanity, Reverend James Lawson and the Future of Revolutionary Nonviolence. I would now like to call Ms. Mridu Shekhar, I think President of Kalapriya Foundation, to come up and give her welcome address.
Good evening and welcome to our humble home. We're very proud to have you and these young people who are so energetic and enthusiastic that it makes you feel really hopeful about our future.
Yeah.
I just want to say a few words. I want to thank the Saturday Free School for Philosophy and Black Liberation who have planned this terrific program for us. It's unfortunate that Dr. Lawson couldn't be here. He's the architect of the nonviolent movement in America. He beckons us to claiming the gift of humanity for a future of revolutionary nonviolence. And I think he really truly understood Gandhi. We wish him well. We hope that Dr. Lawson recovers quickly. Born in 1928, Reverend Lawson was a young theologian when he saw the horrors of war and racial inequalities in American society. He resisted the draft and was imprisoned in 1951. Once released, he spent several years in India studying Gandhi's works and visiting with Gandhi's followers at his ashram. Even though Gandhi had been assassinated in 1948, during his 3 years as a Methodist missionary in India, Reverend Lawson was profoundly influenced by Gandhi's principles and practice of satyagraha, using the power of truth, ahimsa, nonviolence in thought, word, and deed, and Gandhi's readiness to sacrifice. That is an important element that is missing in the 21st century. We are not teaching our children to sacrifice, putting themselves before everything else. And the whole social media, it's a situation that we have to try to remedy. Reverend Lawson continues to use his powerful voice for love and compassion. My name is Mridu Shekhar. I'm the president of the board of the Kalapriya Foundation. Kalapriya was established 30 years ago, but during this time, its vision and mission have evolved. We are committed to promoting a more just and compassionate world with South Asian literature, philosophy, and performing arts. We believe the arts will play a crucial role in this task. Music and dance are not just for entertainment and personal enrichment. At best, the arts inspire our empathy and direct our attention beyond ourselves. Uplifting music and stories can enlarge our hearts, reminding us that our lives are intertwined. These stories can invite us to step into a neighbor's shoes, teaching us where they come from and what it feels like to live their lives. Good art has the power to bring us together in community and heal the rift which separates us from them. Kalapriya's mission is to create a more inclusive community, one based on mutual respect, cultural humility, and curiosity in everybody. With your help and Reverend Lawson's example, we hope we can create a new culture of love and compassion. And thank you very much for being here.
Thank you so much, Mriduji, also for opening up your space on such short notice. And I wanted to begin the event with a quote from Reverend Lawson. Give some of us nonviolent religious people in the United States all the money we are spending on war and the military and the freedom to put it to work for a different society. And in a decade, you will have a different society in the land of ours. As Mriduji mentioned, Reverend James Lawson has been called the architect of the nonviolent movement of America, or as the late Dr. Vincent Harding called, the Black Freedom Movement. This evening, we will discuss the life and ideas of Reverend Lawson, in our event, Claiming the Gift of Humanity, Reverend James Lawson and the Future of Revolutionary Nonviolence. I wanted to thank all of you for coming because, as you know, or I hope you know, Reverend Lawson is unable to be here in person. He had agreed to our event. He was very excited to be here and to really speak to the people of Chicago. He was originally supposed to come for the Parliament of World Religions, but his health took a turn, and so he was not able to come to Chicago. However, rather than cancel the event, we felt it was imperative to continue because the life that he lived and the ideas that he stood for are absolutely necessary for our times in this moment, what Dr. Martin Luther King called the fierce urgency of now. So I wanted to just speak a little bit about why we wanted to do this event and how we understand our moment. As the nation faces a tremendous moral, political, economic, and spiritual crisis, and as darker humanity seeks an alternative to the Western world order, we return to the history that Reverend Lawson embodies. The ruling elite of this country create crises of gun violence, joblessness, and economic inequality in major cities like Chicago and Philadelphia, where many of my colleagues have come from. The US-led NATO policy of confrontation keeps us on the brink of nuclear war. The American people across political boundaries reject deindustrialization and a war economy and seek an alternative vision that will give dignity to their lives. We must return to the nonviolent movement to envision an alternative to endless war, poverty, racism, sexism, and violence, which is what is known as the Western and the white supremacist world order. A serious study of this movement, which we hope to embark on today, this evening, will allow all people to rise to the task of what Reverend Lawson calls claiming the gift of humanity, or the gift of life, in the face of ideologies that denigrate the meaning of being a human and the capacity of ordinary people to struggle for a better world. So with that, I would like to invite my colleague, Neha Chibukula, who has put together a documentary. Because Reverend Lawson couldn't be here, we really wanted to share his words and his life with you to the best of our ability, but especially those clips that we felt really spoke to our moment. So I'll let Neha come up and introduce the documentary.
At a time when humanity world over is being told that they have reached their maximum potential, and this is the age of machines and artificial intelligence, we strongly believe that people make history. We look to human beings like Reverend Lawson, Diane Nash, Martin Luther King Jr., James Baldwin, Paul Robeson, W.E.B. Du Bois, and many others who have dedicated their lives to the struggle for human dignity and positive peace, and through this struggle claim their fullest potential. They serve as role models for young people today who have been deprived of this history and the sense of revolutionary agency. We must claim our humanity and continue the struggle. Reverend James Lawson was born in Uniontown, Pennsylvania on September 22, 1928. In 1947, in his first year of college, he joined the Fellowship of Reconciliation and started reading Gandhi's autobiography. Soon after, he sent back his draft card in defiance of the Selective Service Act, which he saw as an unjust law, much like Jim Crow. He served time in jail during the Korean War as a draft resistor. He lived as a Methodist minister in Nagpur in India. While being there, he continued to study Gandhian Satyagraha or Truth Force and met India's first Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru. In 1962, Reverend Lawson became the pastor of the Centenary Methodist Church in Memphis. In 1968, Lawson organized the striking black sanitation workers and urged Martin Luther King Jr. to join the strike. We've made this documentary because Reverend Lawson's life serves as an example for us, and the ideas to which he dedicated his life show us the way forward. Reverend Lawson calls nonviolence as a creative energy within all individuals that they can harness to transform themselves, to resolve conflicts and heal, and to help people take power of building the just world that they envision. Through this non-violent struggle emerge transformed individuals with new social relationships. It is the only way to bring King's idea of a beloved community into reality. Through this documentary, we trace the history of the Black freedom movement, from the struggle for civil rights to the struggle for economic justice and peace. King's words during the Vietnam War remain pertinent, and not just pertinent, like necessary for our times, when these evils of militarism, extreme materialism, and racism continue to plague the world. As Martin Luther King Jr. said in 1967, quote, "America can well lead the way in the revolution of values," end quote. The American people stand today fulfilling this prophecy. Their position on the question of war and peace is clear. They demand peace and see this as the foremost question of importance in their struggle for democracy, for a true democracy. As this struggle continues today, we look back to the history of the peace movement that emerged during the Third American Revolution, or the nonviolent Black freedom struggle. We return to this history not just to celebrate it as a thing of the past, but to learn from it and to apply it to our times. Thank you.
There is no greater invention of the 20th century than nonviolence, because it allows us to fight warfare without violence. It gives us a method of making social change without killing and maiming our fellow human beings. Nonviolence is a more powerful way of making change, because often with violence you attack individuals and you leave the system or the real problem untouched.
We took the whole group through a holistic view of nonviolence, its history, its roots in the Bible, its roots in Christian thought, the methods of nonviolence. We told the stories of nonviolence. And I stressed the Gandhian idea of our being engaged in an experiment. It may have much more meaning to the attacker if, as he strikes you in the cheek, you're looking him in the eyes.
Unfortunately, the concept of nonviolence for many people is that you get hit on one cheek, you turn the other cheek, you don't do anything. But nonviolence means fighting back. But you're fighting back with another purpose and with other weapons. Number one, your fight is to win that person over. And that is a fight. That's a struggle. That's much more challenging than fisticuffs.
Okay,
if I was being beaten, what is it that I would be able to do?
we said we were going to desegregate downtown Nashville. Our first step was going to be desegregate lunch counters and restaurants. That, of course, was the first Gandhian step. That was the first step of nonviolence. To research and examine and focus on an issue. Choose a target, choose an issue.
Now let's see what we've learned from this to us as to how we might act non-violently. What are the basic problems here so far?
You cannot go on a demonstration with 25 people doing whatever they want to do. They have to have a common discipline. And that's a key word for me, that the difficulty with nonviolent people and efforts is that they don't recognize the necessity of fierce discipline and training and strategizing and planning and recruiting and doing the kinds of things you do to have a movement. That That can't happen spontaneously. It has to be done systematically.
Let each person now get himself or herself a partner that they will stick with. Now, we don't want a white person with a Negro of the opposite sex, because we don't want to fight that battle.
We were told in advance that day that they were going to allow the hoodlums to beat us up, and then the policemen would arrest us. So we need to be prepared to get beaten and arrested. So that was the condition under which we went down.
The day that the police first arrested us, they announced to us, okay, all you niggers, get up from the lunch counter and, or we're going to arrest you. And their attitude was like, well, we warned you. So they repeated it a couple of times and nobody moved. And of course, we were prepared for this. So they said, well, we warned you, you won't move, okay, everybody's under arrest. And then they turned and they looked around at the lunch counter again, and the second wave of students had all taken seats. And they were confounded, kind of looked at each other like, now what do we do, you know? They said, well, okay, we'll arrest those two, and they did it. And then the third wave, and no matter what they did and how many they arrested, there was still a lunch counter full of students there.
The Syrian police were ill prepared for a mass civil disobedience effort. They had anticipated that once the violence took place and the arrest began, our movement would dissipate, would be chased away, because that's the purpose, after all, of doing the violence, and it's the purpose of doing the arresting. It's hopeful that then whatever this is will vanish. That's the end of it. That didn't happen.
You're in jail. Man, what my mother gonna say when she hear about that?
They had a philosophy, which was a power of nonviolence. And that kind of power we felt was more forceful than all of their police force, all of their lawmakers, and all of their dogs or billy clubs or jails, and that our capacity and willingness to suffer outweighed any power they had.
It allowed for the whole community to be participants in the movement. Because that's one of the things that we in the nonviolent world always teach, namely, that in the nonviolent movement, everyone can be a participant. Children can participate, women can participate, men can participate, young people, old people. Everyone can do the work.
Dr. King, wouldn't you be on stronger grounds, though, if you refused to buy at those stores, and if you called upon the white people of the country to follow you because of both your moral and your legal right not to buy?
I think, Mr. Spivak, sometimes it is necessary to dramatize an issue because many people are not aware of what's happening. And I think the sit-ins serve to dramatize the indignities and the injustices and the dissatisfaction of the Negro with the whole system of segregation.
I asked the mayor, first of all, Mayor West, do you feel that it's wrong to discriminate against a person solely on the basis of his race or color? And we needed him to say integrate the counters, or to tell Nashville to do what Nashville knows it should have done a long time ago, like about 95 years ago after the Civil War.
They asked me some pretty soul-searching questions. And one that was addressed to me as a man. And I tried to, as best I could, to answer it frankly and honestly, that I could not agree that it was morally right for someone to sell them merchandise and refuse them service. And I had to answer it just exactly that way. Of course, I received considerable criticism for it, but had I to answer it again, I would answer it in the same way again, because it was a moral question, and it's one that a man has to answer and not a politician.
A time comes when silence is betrayal. The truth of these words is beyond doubt, but the mission to which they call us is a most difficult one. Even when pressed by the demands of inner truth, men do not easily assume the task of opposing their government's policy, especially in time of war. We are now faced with the fact, my friends, that tomorrow is today. We are confronted with the fierce urgency of now in this unfolding conundrum of life and history. That is such a thing as being too late. Over the bleached bones and jumbled residues of numerous civilizations are written the pathetic words, too late. Some of us who have already begun to break the silence of the night have found that the calling to speak is often a vocation of agony, but we must speak. I am as deeply concerned about our own troops there as anything else. For it occurs to me that what we are submitting them to in Vietnam is not simply the brutalizing process that goes on in any war where armies face each other and seek to destroy. We are adding cynicism to the process of death, for they must know after the short period there that none of the things we claim to be fighting for are really involved. Before long, they must know that their government has sent them into a struggle among Vietnamese. The more sophisticated surely realize that we are on the side of the wealthy and the secure, while we create a hell for the poor. The pursuit of this widened war has narrowed domestic welfare programs, making the poor, white and Negro, bear the heaviest burdens both at the front and at home. While the anti-poverty program is cautiously initiated, zealously supervised and evaluated for immediate results, billions are liberally expended for this ill-considered war. The recently revealed misestimate of the war budget amounts to $10 billion for a single year. This error alone is more than 5 times the amount committed to anti-poverty programs. The security we profess to seek in foreign adventures, we will lose in our decaying cities. The bombs in Vietnam explode at home. They destroy the hopes and possibilities for a decent America. Now it should be incandescently clear that no one who has any concern for the integrity and life of America today can ignore the present war. If America's soul becomes totally poisoned, part of the autopsy must read Vietnam. It can never be saved so long as it destroys the deepest hopes of men the world over. So it is that those of us who are yet determined that America will be led down the path of protest and dissent, working for the health of our land.
There could be no easy calls for nonviolence in my judgment, because the work of justice and truth and dismantling the false myths that we have about ourselves is a major piece of work. If you're a member of our nation, you pay taxes, and those taxes provide for the largest military force in the history of humankind. for the largest war economy that anyone knows anything about. It has us in over 800 military bases on almost every continent, as far as I know, with naval fleets and submarine fleets and air fleets and soldiers planted all over the world. We've been almost in continuous war the entirety of the 21st century. We have our soldiers are in at least 4 countries in Africa today shooting at African boys, African forces. We are the most violent society in the history of humankind. We're the most violent society in the world today. And we have trusted the gods of war so much that we are convinced that violence is the way you manage and dominate and control things. Therefore, that's what we have practiced. And so our society has now reached a stage of its change and its evolution, so that we have mass killings almost every day somewhere in the country.
We are in what I regard as a frightening period in the history of this country. I'm a patriot. I really think that we no longer have a government of the people, by the people, and for the people. I think now we have a government of the corporations, by the corporations, and for the corporations. I'm troubled that we no longer have a free press. We have a corporate press, corporate media. The Supreme Court has ruled with Citizens United that it's legal for wealthy people to buy politicians. And right now, all of our systems are imploding. Our education system, and certainly in large cities. Our so-called justice system, which is an injustice system, where people are incarcerated in order for there to be the new slavery, the new Jim Crow. The education system, the economic system, which has an incredible people unemployed. I think we're in a serious place when it comes to the country that our children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren will inherit. And it's up to us to determine what that country will be like.
I am convinced that if we are to get on the right side of the world revolution, we as a nation must undergo a radical revolution of values. We must rapidly begin the shift from a thing-oriented society to a person-oriented society, when machines and computers, profit motives and property rights are considered more important than people. The giant triplets of racism, extreme materialism, and militarism are incapable of being conquered. A true revolution of values will soon cause us to question the fairness and justice of many of our past and present policies. America, the richest and most powerful nation in the world, can well lead the way in this revolution of values. That is nothing except a tragic death wish to prevent us from reordering our priorities so that the pursuit of peace will take precedence over the pursuit of war. There's nothing to keep us from molding a recalcitrant status quo with bruised hands until we have fashioned it into a brotherhood. this call for worldwide fellowship that lifts neighborly concern beyond one's tribe, race, class, and nation is in reality a call for an all-embracing and unconditional love for all mankind. This oft misunderstood, this oft misinterpreted concept so readily dismissed by the niches of the world as a weak and cowardly force has now become an absolute necessity for the survival of man. When I speak of love, I'm not speaking of some sentimental and weak response. I'm not speaking of that force which is just emotional bosh. I'm speaking of that reality. Now let us begin. Now let us rededicate ourselves to the long and bitter but beautiful struggle for a new world. This is the calling of the sons of God, and our brothers wait eagerly for our response.
Nonviolence suggests that the greatest force of the universe is the force of life that is lodged in you. Come to understand that force in you of life, living energy, love, truth, beauty, and use that force for personal and social change. You will have tapped what Gandhi of India called force more powerful, against which the evil forces in our world, in yourself or in others, cannot prevail. The human race has not yet achieved the nobility or the understanding of its universe that is still possible. The best for the thousands of years journey of the human race is yet to come. The problems have not been resolved. The healing has not yet taken place. We are not even using and tapping 20% of the power of life that is in each of us. Our major piece of work, we the living, we the created, our major piece of work is to make certain that we push and move our own life to the full God-given, creation-given capacity of life itself. Life is power. Life is light. Life is love. Your primary task in life is to exploit the gift of life so that you become fully alive, fully a man or a woman in love with life and using the powers of life to shape your own life and to shape your family's life and to shape your world. That in the 21st century, we need campaigns and movements essentially of compassion, for nonviolence is love, Gandhi said. Nonviolence is truth. Nonviolence is soul force. We need in the 21st century of the United States campaigns and movements of nonviolence. Our nation must be changed if our nation is going to live. Make a world that is yet to be. A friend of mine has said it well. I am a citizen of a country that does not yet exist. Be a citizen in the United States of a country that does not yet exist, but through the power of equality, liberty, and justice for all, a country that will one day exist in every way.
Sorry, my mind is on the documentary, and I hope everyone was as moved and touched by the documentary and the words of Reverend Lawson as I was. And now I'm very excited to have a roundtable discussion to discuss some of these ideas. So I would like to call up our roundtable panelists, Dr. Monteiro, Mr. Mohan and Minister Abel Muhammad. So I would just like to say a few words about the panel, the roundtable, before I introduce our discussants. And I would just like to say a few words about our idea and why we chose these three gentlemen. So I think, and on behalf of all the organizers, we all think that these three gentlemen embody Reverend Lawson's idea of claiming the gift of humanity. They have all striven in their lives for more than just material accumulation, choosing, we feel, to live lives of deep moral and social purpose. Across multiple cities and even countries, they have worked to deliver this message to many people. They emerge from organizations and traditions which many may not feel are naturally in dialogue with each other, but we feel that they must belong together because they follow this principle. And I think that we will see in our discussion that all three see claiming the gift of humanity as deeply tied to the struggle to change society and the world for the better. And for the people to indeed make history, discussions like this are very important. So now to introduce them one by one. To my right is Minister Abel Muhammad. He is a student minister of the Nation of Islam here in Chicago. Minister Abel was born and raised in the Mexican community in the city. He has worked for many years for unity against violence, racism, and poverty among the Mexican, the broader Latino community, and the Black freedom struggle here in the city and around the country. Then to my right is Dr. Anthony Monteiro. He is the founder of the Saturday Free School for Philosophy and Black Liberation. He holds a PhD in sociology from Temple University and is a lifelong resident of North Philadelphia. And he's kindly traveled all the way to attend this and be part of this event. He's a renowned authority on the work of Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois and Dr. Martin Luther King. He's a revolutionary scholar who has been active in movements for civil rights, peace, and democracy at home and abroad for several decades. All the way here at the end of the panel is Mr. Mohan. He is visiting the United States from the city of Panipat in India. He is the General Secretary of the Gandhi Global Family, which is an organization dedicated to furthering the cause of Gandhian nonviolence in South Asia and around the globe. He is an attorney by profession and has served as an advocate at the Supreme Court of India and has also been an activist for peace, labor, and democracy in India for many years. Ram Mohanji will be speaking in a mix of English and Hindi, so Dr. Purba Chatterjee, who's a young scientist, a member of the Saturday Free School, has kindly agreed to help us with translation. Perhaps she'll also say a few words if she feels so moved. I would like to invite our, starting with Minister Abel, starting with Dr. Monteiro, all of our roundtable discussions will say a few words about the documentary and about some of the themes that they feel resonated with them. So if we could start with Dr. Monteiro.
Thank you very, very much. And it's such an honor to be here in Chicago and to be at this venue dedicated to the art, poetry, and civilization of South Asia and of its great freedom fighter and leader, founder of the nation, Mahatma Gandhi. Hearing the words of Martin Luther King Jr. spoken over 50 years ago pierced the heart. They are irresistible because they are true. Martin Luther King, not fully appreciated in our time, often seen as less than a revolutionary. Most times seen as an assimilationist, as a person who existed for a moment in history, but doesn't have relevance beyond the period that he lived. Martin Luther King said, I want to fight with a sword that heals. And that sword that heals is the sword of love. And he said that we exist in the colony of time, but we should aspire to the universe of the empire, of eternity. That is a way of him talking about in each of these set of words that the divine is in each of us. That those who are looking for the divine in the sky are looking in the wrong place. In our society, most of us are looking in the wrong place because we do not see what is in us. Because if we knew what was in us, we would know that we could change this society. Like Johan said, I'm from Philadelphia. And I lived here in Chicago for some years. I went to the University of Chicago. A lot of people refer to Philadelphia as the East Coast Chicago, and Chicago as the Midwest Philadelphia. I have to say your city is more beautiful than ours, at least in this area that is kept up. I know every part of Chicago isn't like this. But this is a beautiful city founded by a Haitian, a city on a lake that Martin Luther King came to in 1966 to fight the evil of poverty and war and racial segregation. He came to this city. One of his last campaigns was here. He inspired and lifted this city up. James Lawson, I'm certain, was here with him. Certainly the great Diane Nash, born in the city of Chicago, not known by Chicago. When I was coming up, Diane Nash was, and I've never met her, sadly. We were doing the year of Gandhi in Philadelphia a few years ago. James Lawson came and the city council lifted his name up. Diane Nash was scheduled to come, but COVID intervened. And then she had a hip replacement. Diane Nash is one of the most courageous human beings in the Black freedom movement. A lot of us think that courage is manifested when you pick up the gun. I used to believe that. And I picked up a gun. Didn't hardly know how to use a gun. But Diane Nash not only was a part of the student sit-in movements in Nashville. Diane Nash was one of the leaders of the Freedom Rides. For people that don't know what they were, if you got on a bus in Philadelphia going to Atlanta, Georgia, when that bus got to the nation's capital, so-called capital of democracy in the world, all the black people had to move to the back because you couldn't travel on interstate highways in the South unless the bus was segregated on the basis of race. The Freedom Riders got on the buses in Washington and refused to go to the back. When those buses got in the South, and they made no secret that they intended to desegregate interstate commerce in the South by what they did on those buses. So when they got in the South, the Ku Klux Klan, Nazis and racists were waiting for them. But they did not retreat. And they said, in the most profound sense, our lives are a witness to what is and what must be. These were not cowards. We got it twisted because this is a violent society. So we think violence is the answer to violence. Young people in Philadelphia, in Chicago, in St. Louis, in Atlanta, they have gotten that message. You answer violence with violence. And if you look deeply, especially at our young men, they are taught that the sword that heals, love, is somehow a weak response to life. You want to be a man, be a thug, be a gangster, be loveless and hard. Well, they didn't learn that on their own. That's what the society believes. 800 military bases all around the world, and then claim that these military bases exist to ensure the peace of the world. A ruling elite that specializes in the big lie all the time, every day. All they do is lie. People who run this country do not have an ounce of humanity in them. And we have to face that. But we must do it not by becoming like them, but becoming the opposite of them. And if we don't do anything in our lives, and like Reverend Lawson said, our lives must be examples of what must be. Everybody can't be on the front lines of the struggle. Everybody, I've heard people say all the time, I ain't gonna let nobody smack me in the head. Well, you don't join the march. You do something else. Maybe raise some money. But most people that say they wouldn't let nobody slap them in the head, they don't even do nothing. Right? And that's just an excuse not to do anything. But the ones that do it, don't call them cowards, call the ones that do nothing cowards. My last point is this. There is such a thing as the Black prophetic tradition. As Martin Luther King and Howard and Sue Bailey Thurman went to India, Howard Thurman and his wife Sue Bailey Thurman met Gandhi in 1935, and Gandhi said to him, "It will be the American Negro that will best exemplify my philosophy of nonviolence." The American Negro. What did Gandhi see that we don't see in our own selves? Well, I think what he saw, and then this is further elaborated by Martin Luther King, by James Lawson, and by others, that there is a tradition among us. And it is a tradition that arises, first of all, out of our African civilizational past, but most importantly, out of our resistance for 400 years. And that tradition is what I like to call the Black prophetic tradition. It's an interesting thing, be you a Muslim in the Nation of Islam, or a Christian, or a Buddhist, or Hindu. Black people believe that in the ancient books of the Abrahamic religions, that is Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, the people that the prophets were talking about is us. That we are the people of prophecy. That we are the people who the prophets of old were talking about. It's an interesting thing, and I'm going to shut up. I'm not 8 minutes. It's an interesting thing. You don't have to go to a church to discover this. It's something in Black folk that believes we are the people that the ancient prophets were talking about. And so Martin Luther King, he was expressing that in the most eloquent way. Now, there is a debate that has been going on for some time in this country. Sometimes it is expressed in ways that might not always be so comfortable, such as Kanye West or Kyrie Irving. But what were they saying, or what were they trying to get at? Well, first of all, they said that they are the Jews, which is their way of saying that they are the descendants of ancient biblical ancestors. That's all they were saying. That's what Kyrie was saying. However, Martin Luther King expressed it best. I'd like to end by just expressing my condolence to Minister Abel and to all the members of the Nation of Islam who are here on the loss of the angel. Excuse me. Abel Muhammad. That was a tremendous loss, and I know the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan feels it deeply. That story is very important for us to know about. I read Jabril in the Final Call for many, many years. I did not know that he was both a witness to the Honorable, Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad and the Honorable Louis Farrakhan. He was the one who said to Minister Farrakhan, or as Farrakhan put it, he, Jabril, introduced me to what my purpose was.
Right.
And that purpose was to rebuild the Nation of Islam. A great organization, and what you all mean to us in the Free School is words can't express it. But I'd just like to express my condolences to all of you and to wish you well as we all go forward in the spirit of Jabril Muhammad. Thank you very much.
Ram Mohan Raj please share a few words.
Brothers and sisters of America, Chicago has been the city of my dreams, a revolutionary and spiritual city. We have been inspired by the city since childhood. One of the reasons is that it was the city that a major non-violent movement of workers took place for an 8 hours workday in 1886. A protest at the Haymarket Square was met fired on by the police, and the bleeding workers painted a flag red their blood. This red flag has become a symbol for the Satyagrahis struggling for the fulfillment of their objectives all over the world. This is a call saying that no matter how cruel the oppressor is, he can be countered with truth and non-violence. Secondly, this is the city where Swami Vivekananda, a young Indian monk, shared the original basis of religion, especially Hinduism, in the World Parliament of Religions held in 1893. He argued that the ancient sages of the present true religion is to be the full of love for all and to reject all narrow mindedness and sectarianism. I consider myself blessed to have come to this city. For me, it is nothing less than a pilgrimage. I am proud and overwhelmed by these moments. While paying homage to those immortal martyrs on May 1st, I also go down to our great monk, Swami Vivekananda, who paved the way for peaceful, non-violent revolution. I am also happy to learn that Chicago is a center of life of African American people and the site of many battles in the great Black freedom struggle, whose struggle for democracy gathers us all together today. Today, the whole world is passing through a period of war, violence, and unrest. There are only two options before it: destruction or mutual coexistence. Surely, the other way is better. The subject of my speech at the special session to be held in Chicago by this evening, claiming the gift of humanity, message of India in present contest, and the future of revolutionary non-violence. 15th August marked the independence of India. However, the day that India's independent flag was hurled in Delhi in 1947, the leader of its freedom movement, Mahatma Gandhi, was in Calcutta. While 15th August brought India freedom, the last act of the British was to cruelty between partition the country, leading to immense bloodshed and violence. During the last years of his life, Gandhiji went from village to village, fighting for unity and peace at great threat to his life. The partition of India into India and Pakistan, and eventually India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh, has led to constant conflict. Mahatma Gandhi's dream was that India would be peaceful and united, and it is a dream that he works towards today. The role of US government in Asia is known in the case of Korea and Vietnam. However, while India never had to face a direct conflict from the US, we have been the target of covert operations. The historical role of the US government had been to increase tension and conflict in the region. The US leadership consistently opposed India's foreign policy of non-alignment and peaceful coexistence, including through the takeover of the entire island of the Daigu Garcia for a US military base, arming to the teeth military regimes in Pakistan, including during the brutal massacre of Bangladeshi civilians in 1971, and US deployment of 7th Naval Fleet to threaten India with nuclear weapons during the Bangladesh Liberation War. Nevertheless, in the early 1970s, the South Asian subcontinent saw a golden age with the possibility of peace and cooperation. Indira Gandhi came to power with a landslide victory in 1971. The same year, Bangladesh was liberated under the leadership of Sheikh Mujibur Rahman. The military leadership in Pakistan was overturned and Zulfikar Ali Bhutto became the country's first elected leader. Sri Lanka separated from the British Empire in 1972 under the leadership of Shri Mao Bandaranaike. All these four countries had heads of state who were committed to form a socialism, secularism, and peace. The situation became unacceptable to the US ruling class, and the activities of CIA increased greatly. In 1975, Bangladesh Mujibur Rahman was assassinated. Pakistan PM Bhutto was deposed in a military coup in 1977 and later hanged. Insurgency was spread in India, and Indira Gandhi was vilified and eventually assassinated in 1984. South Asia is yet to recover from the impact of these assassinations. There is no doubt that these policies of destabilization are the actions of US deep state, the same force which targeted Martin Luther King Jr. and the nonviolent movement in the US. After the fall of Soviet Union, India's economy was opened up and new relations with the US were established. A section of the Indian people started seeing economic opportunities in the US. They think that the US is a heavenly escape from conditions in India. However, they don't know or understand the true America. Indians and Americans people share a deep bond because we are the lands that have given two world Mahatmas, the great souls, Mahatma Gandhi and Martin Luther King Jr. While the Americans, ruling elite was conspiring against India, the American people approached India into a very different way through struggles for civil rights, democracy, and world peace. Our two people are connected in a deep historical bond. India, we know and respect Martin Luther King Jr. Mahatma Gandhi taught the world ahimsa and satyagraha, non-violence and truth force. Further, he taught the Indian people abhay or courage. Non-violence is a fundamental belief in human being and humanity. It is not weak, but a strong force which allows us to resist injustice. Satyagraha is a call for us to always follow the path of truth, The future requires a non-violent struggle for the truth. Today, we celebrate James Lawson. In doing so, we celebrate both Martin Luther King Jr. and Mahatma Gandhi. We at the Gandhi Global Family are deeply committed to this legacy. We see ourselves as soldiers of peace who are part of movement of world peace. We seek to learn from the legacy of Reverend James Lawson, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. and Dr. W.E.B. Du Bois. The world needs non-violence in international relations so we can move peacefully towards the truth. A real non-violent movement will require us to confront all forms of injustice, including racism, poverty, and the war. The world awaits the American people, answering the call of Martin Luther King Jr. to transform the unjust structures of this society and thereby transform the world. We join hand in hand with the American people in their fight for world peace. The Indian and American people can play a decisive role in the birth of a new peaceful world order, and that is our prayer for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Ram Mohanji, for that wonderful international perspective. And now I would like to call student Minister Abel Muhammad to share a few words.
In the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful, I bear witness that there is no God but Allah, who we believe intervened in our affairs here in North America, in the person of Master Muhammad, who we know as the Great Mahdi. Mahdi means in Arabic a self-guided one, who comes to guide others to the straight path, the correct path, the proper path. As the son of Mexicans, the first of my family born in the United States of America, I could never thank him enough for raising here in America someone to lead, teach, and guide us here in America, and ultimately to those who would heed that call, the rest of the world. A man who you saw in one of the photographs in that beautiful video that was put together, another son of Georgia, like Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., the most honorable Elijah Muhammad. Though I never met him, because I was born in December of 1974, and he departed from amongst us just a few blocks from here at Mercy Hospital in February of 1975. Yet, I'm blessed to have been introduced to his teachings because of one man who is my teacher and the example that taught me not only what a man, a human being striving to live right looks like, but he taught me what it meant to be a Mexican. He taught me what it meant to be a Christian, because I was a Christian, and I still am a Christian. He taught me what it means to be beyond those limited labels, because none of those labels can identify us. We didn't call ourselves the Black Muslims. Others called us the Black Muslims. It's not a bad name, so we used it, but we never said we're the Black Muslims. When you read the final call, or used to read Muhammad Speaks, it didn't say the Black Muslim Program, it said the Muslim Program. And it's because of that kind of forward thinking that I'm blessed, and I was blessed just not too far from here, in the middle of the city where I attended high school, Whitney Young High School. I was introduced to the teachings of the Honorable Elijah Muhammad through the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. So I have to start by acknowledging my teachers and greeting you in their names and the greeting words of peace, which we say in the Arabic language, Assalamu alaikum. En español significa la paz esté contigo, or in English you would say peace be unto you. And that's the big thing. The two words that jumped out of me in that video we saw was two words that Reverend Lawson and Dr. King used. Peace, and then something that Reverend Lawson was saying in that TED Talk video about healing. And how we can never really heal because the system doesn't change. And it reminded me of a beautiful passage in the Holy Quran that said, had we wished to take a pastime for ourselves, we would have taken one. You know, a pastime is the Cubs are playing the Sox. That's a pastime. That's America's pastime, they call it, baseball. It's not productive, though. You're just literally passing time. God doesn't just pass time. So he said, if I wanted to take a pastime, I would have taken one. But he said, nay or no. We hurl truth. Since we're using the baseball analogy, the Holy Quran says we hurl truth at falsehood until we knock out its brains. The problem in the world today is not that people don't recognize things are all messed up. I believe now the level of dissatisfaction, it is acknowledged. Everything's messed up. That's why there's so much division. And we keep changing people in office, but feeding people into the same system. We keep altering educational tent poles that we want people to reach. Economic maneuvers that we think will improve things. And no matter how much we do that, we keep getting not just the same results, worse results. As beautiful as the area we're in is right now, if you walk just a few blocks south of here, and you don't have to wait for it to be dark. If you walk a few blocks south of here, it's a very different situation. Because people are willing to invest in buildings and beautifying them. But that doesn't change people. What would be a better investment, which was what was read at the beginning of Reverend Lawson's words, if we were to take that money and invest it in human beings, we could get rid of poverty. We could get rid of want. We could get rid of war, because the wars exist not because there's a lack of anything on the planet. The wars exist because there are people on the planet who rule. And their rulership is based off a wicked idea. And that is where Dr. King and Reverend Lawson were pushing us to face that reality. The problem is not with our lack of resources, except for one most valuable one. What is our thinking based on? That's the resource that Mexican, Puerto Rican, Brazilian, Portuguese, Spaniard, Nigerian, Ghanaian, the people of the islands of the Pacific and the islands of the Caribbean, Latin America, Central America, Asia, wherever you go on the planet, when you see the condition of the people, it mirrors other people. Different languages, different shades, all of them, the masses being ruled by a few elite who are not even natives to the place where they rule. Why? Because there's an idea that has enslaved all of the people. So our war, and to be true revolutionaries, is to seek real freedom. But not freedom in terms of, oh, you have the right to work where you want to work, live where you want to live. Of course, that's the most basic of right. But if your thinking is limited, because it's restricted by thinking that our success means we get to live next door to our oppressors. Or worse, we just want to replace our oppressors. But we carry their thinking, then all we're doing is replacing this one color for another color with the same mind. And we get the same results. And what nobody wants to deal with the ugly truth of is that, yes, nonviolence is the answer. But who are we exercising that principle with? Because if you walk a few blocks south, nobody's teaching us to be nonviolent with one another. There's the promotion of violence. Mexicans are the #1 killers of Mexicans. Black people are the #1 killers of black people. Christians are the #1 killer of Christians. Muslims are the #1 killers of Muslims. We are ignore that fact in reality. How can we expect a war-making society to accept the idea of nonviolence and peace? All of these years and generations before Reverend Lawson, before Dr. King, there were emissaries that came to try to reason with the thinking of those who are wicked, who rule, to tell them and appeal to them there's a better way. This starts, and you can read about it in the prophetic books of the Bible. You have a Moses coming to Pharaoh. And in the Holy Quran, it says he's advised by God. Moses is told, speak a kind word to Pharaoh. That's not violence. It's not. Violence is about intent. Pharaoh had a wicked mind, and he said, well, not only do I reject your kind words, but I'm going to make it worse on your people, according to the way that the history is written. And what happened? Moses didn't do anything. He remained humble. But the forces of nature intervened to recreate a form of balance and to justify the removal of those who were enslaved by their enslaver, because they didn't have the weaponry to fight, even if they wanted to fight. So many times in the history as it's given in America, the Nation of Islam is always juxtaposed as versus the nonviolent movement. When if you look at our history, we're not even allowed to carry so much as a knife. We're not trying to integrate with them. We're not trying to we want to get along with them in peace, but we don't want anything they have to offer. We're not out there asking for grants. We're not asking for scholarships. All we want, and tell me if this is not a method of peace, leave us alone and we'll leave you alone. Isn't that what happens in court when two people are married and can't get along anymore? You're told, you know what? Since you'll stop calling the police, why don't you separate for a little while? Do you have someplace you can go for the night? If not, we have a prison for you. And I'm making light of it because I want us to see how reasonable what we've been offered by God is. He didn't send Moses to tell Pharaoh integrate the children of Israel in. He called those people out. But it wasn't a physical exodus that was needed. It's a mental exodus that's needed. Well, how can we keep going back into this educational system thinking we're going to produce that which will allow us to exit out of it? That's why the Saturday Free School is so valuable. You have a brother here in Dr. Monteiro. He's gone to their universities and he's mastered what they have to offer there, but he's able to formulate it in a way that doesn't reattach us to a system that's broken. He's trying to get us to see we don't need that system, but we do have to exist. Now that's not any different. We can give him a lot of call for that because he suffered because of that. Everyone who comes with an idea that is counter the accepted norm of those who rule, they have to suffer. They have to be punished. They have to run from city to city. Doing what? Just to teach the people that your unity is okay? My teacher, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, said about the nonviolent movement in America that God could not have given to us a more gentle or beautiful example of the principle of nonviolence than the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Nobody could have said it better. Appealing. If you have a heart, how could you reject such a beautiful human being who wasn't just great in oratory, but you could feel the sincerity. He was appealing to them. How can you speak war here or peace here, but send us to war there? How can you talk about the plenty and the resources you want to distribute, but deny your own people if they are your people right here in the United States of America? This was his heart, completely willing to suffer whatever they would treat him with. And what did they ultimately offer to him? Death. As an example, not for just him. If you read in the histories, this is how they treated all of the prophets and messengers of God. Not because they were threatening them with anything. All they were offering them was turn from your wicked ways. That is where we are right now. Whether we call ourselves Hindu, Buddhist, Christian, Muslim, Jew, Hebrew, whatever it is that we call ourselves, if we call ourselves none of it, spiritual, seeking enlightenment. Okay, well, how are we going to be enlightened in the same system that has poisoned us? And that takes me back to the point I want to close with, that word that Reverend Lawson used, healing. The scriptures tell us that there's a figure who comes with healing in his wings. Well, human beings don't have wings. You do know that, right? But it's symbolic of something. When we open a book, it looks like wings. So it's a human being that comes with a knowledge and a teaching that when the people hear it, if they will adhere to it and allow it to affect their mind, the healing will begin. If we were to be left alone, we could heal on our own, but we're stuck in their system, and their tentacles and claws are wrapped around every aspect of what we do. If you and I turn on the radio, we're in their system. If you turn on your computer, we're in their system. If you walk out and see a billboard, it's in their system. There's subliminal and as well as overt messages that are implanted there with the desire to affect a negative impact in you and I. So even though we know from the tradition that we see ourselves as the people of God in his promise, we may believe that, but these wickedly wise 10% who rule the world, they don't believe it, they know it to be a fact. And they implement plans to counter that reality, which they can't stop, but they'll do what they can to stop it. How do they do it? Counterintelligence program of the United States. That's not a myth. That's not a conspiracy theory. That's a reality that was and is, only they're better at it today. What did they say in their counterintelligence program? They wanted to stop the rise of a black Messiah. Well, the Messiah is the one who's promised to the people who are going to suffer under the prophetic prophecies of those messengers that were sent. There's a book that tells us that they'd be in bondage for 400 years. Wow, that's pretty specific. That they'd be in a strange land that is not their own. That's very specific. And that after 4 centuries, God himself would come and he would do something with them that would prove that it is these people who are the people of the promise because of the presence of the one that was promised. Where else do you have anywhere in the world? We all have revolutionaries, but amongst the black man and woman of America, you have a movement that started with Elijah Muhammad, but then spread out after the 1930s. To include a Black Panther Party. That's one extreme of a consequence of an effect of something that began a movement. From that movement, it is first not organized properly, but the movement begins and you get on one side the Black Panthers, on the other side the nonviolent struggle. Both of them with the same goal in mind, yet separated by ideology. Why? Because the movement needed to work the polarities out so that eventually we would find our way back. So here today you have students of Gandhi, students of the Black liberation theology, a student of the Latin American and struggles of the United States, as well as the Nation of Islam. And we're talking the same language now. Why? To show us that our teachers were right. It just wasn't the right time. But now, since we're together, we're at that critical moment. What do they call it in science? Critical mass. Where something is about to happen. There's going to be a exchange of energy and possible, if it's not controlled properly, a destructive force that could be unleashed. That's where we are right now. And the construction or destruction that will come from this will be based on what we decide to do. If we believe the legacy of Dr. King and Reverend Lawson was proper and correct, if we believe the teachings of Gandhi, the teachings of Christ, the teachings of Moses, the teachings of all the messengers whose names we may know or may not know, their validity will be proven at this time by what we as their students decide to do with the time that we live in. So there's, as I close, the Holy Quran has the 103rd chapter. It's called Al-Asr, which means the time. And it's a very short surah. It says, by the time, surely man, human beings, are in loss, except those who are Muslims. Nope, doesn't say that. It says those who believe and do good. In this time, we can believe whatever we want, but if you're not doing good based on what you believe, then we're lost. So we have to believe and do good and enjoin or extol, to invite others to truth and to patience. That's where we are right now. Everybody's anxious, everybody's frustrated, everybody wants a change, and the enemy is orchestrating all of this, knowing that if he could just hold on and keep us fighting with one another, he remains in power that much longer. It is when he's exposed by us hurling the truth at the false idea of white supremacy, at the false idea that war is what sustains and maintains a government. Rome thought the same thing. Where are they today? Egypt thought the same thing. America believes the same thing because it's the same mind evolving through time, because no one has struck at the core of the idea, because no one has had that truth. And you know what the number one, if you will, testament that that truth is present is? It is that the people unify. Because it is organization unified around truth which will sustain and validate our struggle. So what if we took that same principle of nonviolence and we decided we're going to go teach that in the black churches? We're going to go teach that in the Mexican barrios. We're going to go teach that in the Puerto Rican hoods. We're going to go teach that in Chinatown. We're going to go wherever we are, in our churches, in our cloisters, in our synagogues, and we start telling our people we must be nonviolent with one another. It would change the dynamic of the community. And if we did that, the external enemy would not really be an issue for us. It's all what's happening and not happening within ourselves. But it starts because our mind hasn't been fed from the truth. So Jesus said it would be the truth that sets us free. What truth? Right? We know white supremacy is bad. That's a start. But what do we have to counter it with? Not a myth. What is the truth? We're the original people of the planet. No matter where we are, no matter what our shade is today because of mixtures, when you go to the root of our essence, you can't go beyond what is called the Asiatic black man. The Asiatic black woman. Why Asia? That's a good question, isn't it? Because the whole earth at one time was called Asia. So when you call and look at us, you're looking at the black man and black woman of earth. Some today are called Mexican, but that's only a couple hundred years old. Some are called, Chinese. That's only a couple thousand years old. We've been here for eons and eons. What were we called then? So when we get to the root of that truth, we'll be able to find unity and a bond of respect for one another. And it is in our mind. I'll leave you with these words. I had this here because I wanted to quote it correctly. From the most honorable Elijah Muhammad, it's in point number 5 of what the Muslims believe. We believe in the resurrection of the dead, because I keep saying it's in the head that we've been wounded. Not in physical resurrection, but in mental resurrection. We believe that the so-called Negroes at that time, because this is from the 50s, are most in need of mental resurrection. Listen to the words, most in need. Most is a comparison, meaning there's others in need. But the one in the worst condition, like when you go into an ER, the first thing they tell you is, what's your pain on a level of 1 to 10? Oh, you're a 2? Okay. I got a guy with a missing arm. I'm going to go treat him first. Most in need of mental resurrection. Therefore, they will be resurrected first. Furthermore, we believe we are the people of God's choice. As it has been written, that God would choose the rejected and the despised. We can find no other persons fitting this description in these last days more. There's a comparison again. Meaning others fit it, but nobody fits it better or more than the so-called Negroes in America. And listen to this last sentence. We believe in the resurrection of the righteous. This is pointing to us to the fact that there's a special group in America that will begin a movement that isn't limited to America. It isn't limited to the South and West Side. It's a movement that when it grows, it will encompass the whole earth. I believe that's why someone so powerful as Gandhi, he would see that it is amongst black people in America. Because of what black people have suffered, they have a heart now which allows them to feel the pain of all the other people, because all have suffered. But nobody has suffered more or worse than the black man in America. So when they are resurrected, it will begin a righteous revolution that will allow every whole human being not to have to now accept a black ideology to replace a white ideology. No, all we want now is access to the truth so that we can accept our own and be ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Minister Abel, for those powerful words. And what we hope to do, although time is limited, to have a bit of a discussion among our roundtable participants here. And perhaps I can start the discussion by posing a question, and you all can feel free to also modify it or address something said by one of your colleagues here. So this thread with which Minister Abel ended, I think relates to 2 points tonight, which came up, which are related to the thought of Reverend Lawson and King and Mahatma Gandhi. The first is this idea of what Reverend Lawson calls claiming the gift of life, the gift of creation. That as living human beings, we are, so fortunate on a cosmic scale to experience this gift of life. Yet we are confronted with the tragedy of being born in such an unjust and often terrible world. But as Reverend Lawson argues, it is impossible to separate claiming that gift, rising to our full capacity, from struggling against those unjust structures, which includes both the external and internal experience of life. And the second point is this idea which emerged from the thought of Gandhi and then was very central to the nonviolent movement in America, which, as Ram Mohanji said, is in Sanskrit called satyagraha, which is translated as soul force, truth force, moral force. But in essence, is that deep reservoir of power in the human being, which can be more powerful than the power of a gun, and that is something that exists in all the great religious and spiritual traditions. So I would just like any of the panelists would like to talk about how you see those concepts relating to either your work and or the way forward in the moment that we're in.
Well, I would just say this, Johan. Your words were so beautiful, and it captures. And let me just say this. I know your age, and you are a young man, and you're young. Well, and in a world that says to young men and women that they shouldn't think and talk the way you talk, I think it is extraordinary. You are an example, and I would say I don't have anything to add to what you said, that the great message of Gandhi transmitted through Howard Thurman and James Lawson and Martin Luther King has and is changing the people of this country. Whether they know it, this is not the same people that existed before these prophetic men and women came here. So I am in full agreement with you that this is a moment of truth, and it is a moment for the truth. And I'll just stop there. Perhaps Mr. Abel and this.
आज का जो टॉपिक है बहुत ही प्रासंगिक है, और मैं समझता हूँ कि आज के हालात में जब पूरी दुनिया एक ऐसे कगार पर है, युद्ध पे कगार पर, हिंसा के कगार पर, नफरत के कगार पर, उस समय इसकी बहुत जरूरत है। अगर हम दूसरे संदर्भों में देखें तो जिस तरह से आज यूक्रेन और रशिया का जो लड़ाई दिख रहा है और उसमें जो अमेरिका की, नाटो की भूमिका है, वो उसी तरह से है जिस तरह से एक समय था कि जब जो व्हाइट लोग थे वो कहते थे कि हम तो दुनिया को सभ्य बनाने के लिए निकले हैं, जबकि ऐसा नहीं था। एक सत्ता हथियाने के लिए, गुलामगिरी को बनाने के लिए निकले थे। हम अगर दूसरी तरफ से बात करें तो अफगानिस्तान के अंदर, इराक के अंदर जिस तरह से हस्तक्षेप किए गए और इन्होंने किए, उस पर कुछ नहीं कहा, पर आज वो लोग सबसे बड़े झंडामदार हैं यूक्रेन के अंदर, यूक्रेन को बचाने के लिए। कहाँ गया था वो समय जब इस तरह के जुल्मात हुए थे? महात्मा गांधी ने बार बार इस बात को कहा कि हिंदुस्तान को आजादी किस लिए चाहिए। उन्होंने कहा हिंदुस्तान को आजादी इसलिए चाहिए कि वो दुनिया की सेवा कर सके। नेहरू ने इस बात को कहा कि हमारे जो यहाँ का साम्राज्यवाद के खिलाफ हम लड़ रहे हैं, हमारी लड़ाई वो हर जगह हो रही है जहां पर रंग भेद के खिलाफ, नस्ल भेद के खिलाफ जो लोग लड़ रहे हैं, वहां हमारी जंग लड़ रही है। तो आज के परिटेक्स्ट में मैं कहना चाहूंगा कि कहना, उस पर अमल करना, उनके मानवीय मूल्यों को समझना आज सबसे बड़ी जरूरत है। और हम सब लोग, चाहे भारत के लोग हैं, चाहे एशिया के लोग हैं, और अभी मुझसे पहले आपने कहा कि दुनिया के अंदर अलग अलग तरह के हम लोगों को उनकी एक म्याद है, वो कब बने, कितने साल पहले बने, कोई 100 साल, कोई 200 साल, कोई 1000 साल। पर आज सवाल इस पूरी मानवता की मुक्ति का है, और इसमें हम सब लोगों को जो अहिंसा का रास्ता है, जो नॉन वायलेंस का रास्ता है, वही इस मानवता को बचा सकता है।
I will try my best. Just finishing the last line of my notes. Yes, I'll get that. So Ram Mohan ji was speaking in Hindi, and very beautiful Hindi, so to speak. So I'll do my very best to interpret and translate what he was saying. So he started by saying that the topic that was chosen for today's event, claiming the gift of humanity, is very relevant to our time, especially because the world is at such a turning point in history. This is a really singular moment in history, and unfortunately, this is also a time of great violence, of war, and of hatred, and that is why the topic that has been highlighted today is so very important, takes on new meaning in these times. And then he brings up the issue of the war in Ukraine and the position that the US government and NATO has taken on this this war. He goes back to a time when white people or white civilization basically would claim that their purpose in this world was to civilize the rest of the world, civilize the darker races who had existed for thousands and thousands of years before the white civilization was even born. And then the same white civilization also invaded Iraq and Afghanistan in brutal manner. But that was justified as a struggle for democracy, a struggle for human rights. But the same side, when it comes to Ukraine, does not see. Basically, they flipped their position, even though they were the aggressors at many points in history, and most points in history before this. Then Ram Mohanji was talking about what the Indian freedom struggle meant in terms of what Gandhi would teach or what Nehru would teach. And he says that for Gandhi, the freedom of India needed to be free to serve the world, not just to be free for the Indian people. And Nehru would make the claim a lot of times, over and over, that the struggle for independence in India was mirrored in the struggle of the oppressed people anywhere in the world. And they were one and the same. And this thing, he was also responding to what Minister Abel was saying about people all over the world essentially being the same, and the differences among them in terms of nationality and identity being very new in historical terms. What he was trying to say is that the struggle for freedom that India represents and the Black freedom movement represents is something that's as timeless as this continuous, and that's why he says that the people are the same all over the world and the struggle is still the same, and it's for freedom. And he thinks, and this event is talking about how non-violence is the path towards that freedom in our times.
Before Minister Abel responds, I would just like to say that after this we'll go to audience Q&A, and so we have another mic for that, so please have your questions ready and in mind.
Just really quickly, I would say there's a scripture where the words, it's in the book of Matthew in the Bible, in the New Testament, where Jesus is explaining a certain time, and he likens it to labor pains, which is a birthing process. So this is an ageless struggle, but not eternal, in the sense that at a certain point, we will still struggle, but this struggle, because of what we see happening in the world, it represents the birth of something new. And the new in the Jesus figure is described as somebody who in him there is no free, no slave, no Jew, no Gentile. We could add no black, no white, because those things don't tell you who the human being is. So Dr. King said it so beautifully, to be in a society where we are judged by our character and not the color of our skin. That is what this world has limited us to, where if you have a certain complexion, a certain bank account, you are regarded as better than others. Yet that's not the standard. The standard of what makes one, if there is to be a better, is are you better in service to others? Because none of us is here for ourselves. All of us have a purpose, but my purpose has to be connected to you and you and you, or else it's vanity. And this is a world I heard, I think it was our sister who welcomed us at the beginning from the center. She mentioned how it's, the sister who from the facility here. No. I can't see her back. This society, this world has created human beings who are self-centered to the most negative extent, yet also ignorant and unaware to the most negative extent. So it creates a human being that thinks that they are the center of everything and everything should come to them and for them, and they never see how they relate and how their lack of giving negatively affects everything else and restricts the coming of what they're looking for into their life. These are those universal principles. We call them karma, we call them divine energy, whatever we want to call them, without us realizing it first and then changing. That's the critical thing. Changing. Once we know, that's one thing, but if we know and go back to doing the same thing, nothing has changed. So the Holy Quran says Allah God never changes the condition of a people until they change within themselves. So you and I have access to knowledge, but the proof of us and what we do with that knowledge is not what we recite, it's what we do. And that is our challenge today. The real revolution is not about just talking, it's about doing and performing acts, the good. We can believe in those words, but if we're not doing the good, we're good for nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I would like to ask our audience members who would like to engage with the panel to please come to this microphone in the front. Maybe while people are thinking about questions, I can pose another question, which is building on some of the ideas here. One thing that I'm always thinking about is with our events is this idea of revolution. And I think, with the younger generation, speaking of, myself, maybe in the past as well, maybe still, there's a misconception that revolution is kind of a caricature. It's about being reckless. It's about doing a one-time action. And so I would like to ask you all to address this issue. Do you see revolution as merely a one-time event, a one-time action, or is it a long, drawn-out process that includes, day-to-day work, but also includes not just political and economic components, but it's also a moral and spiritual process? And if so, how do you say?
Ask the audience to respond to that.
Yes, also the audience, please. Yeah, if anyone, I know we have some other young people who also are thinking along these lines. My friends and colleagues, you can also feel free to address this. But everybody be engaged with this question. Yes, Pastor Carolyn.
Well, no, not Pastor. He's the pastor.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry, Dr. Carolyn. My apologies. You can also briefly introduce yourself.
Okay, Carolyn Collins from Trainer, Pennsylvania. And in the Church of the Overcomer. It's a church for people that don't go to church. So, overcome. We overcome by the blood of the Lamb and the word of our testimony. And I think that's significant to this question about how long, is the revolution. Often when people call, especially from the free school, when they talk to me, I always close out that the revolution has begun. And has begun because now we're talking about it, in my mind, in answering that question. And I wanted to also segue with that. Not only is it how long it takes, it takes until it's done. And someone said in the video about this revolution that we are constantly in. And I realized I'm reading a book right now that we actually just came back from South Carolina and visited slave quarters, things like that have now become very commercialized. And there's a book that we bought while there that said, "My family doesn't want me to talk about slavery." And so as our student minister, Muhammad, said, one of the things for this revolution to take place is to change our minds. That when our minds start changing, the revolution gets further intact. It really, the fight is on. At our church right now, we have a little struggle going on because the pastors got the revolution, the revelation that we need to have this revolution going on. The fourth revolution takes place now. Why? It took place in my mind and in my heart. So in this book that I'm reading, I noticed that it's mostly testimonies of slaves that are now in their 90s or 100s that were interviewed right after the Civil War. In the writing, that most of them are probably dead now, but they tell you the age when they were talking about this. And at the end of almost every testimony, the question that that's answered is no, it was against the law. We never read and we never wrote. You couldn't have paper. If you got caught with paper, just like some of us are taking notes, if you got caught with paper, it was death, or they beat you till you prayed that you were dead. The other ending line in every testimony was, and we went to the white folks' church. And at the end of every sermon, it was, and remember, be good to your slave master. Don't disobey your slave master. So they were programmed, their minds, and that mindset had gone on to now in 1936, when the book is written, from the 1800s, and some of these people in 1936, remember they're 95 or 100 years old, still feeling like, it was another close at the end of one of the essays. Well, it was better being slaves because when they got free, they received nothing. So they were hungry. They were naked. But so in their minds had only been programmed to do for and with the slave master. So to speak to those, both of these questions that you just spoke of, until I'm in agreement with our brother, until our minds change, and our minds have to change, even the young people that are 74 years old. I want you to understand that. There's still a level of energy in this young body. Until we change our minds about talking about it, because that was the key in all those essays. They were told, don't talk about it. You know, they were ashamed of being slaves. Well, that was nothing they had control over. So the revolution, Brother Jahan, it will continue until we all change our minds and start talking about it. So that might be till you're 74. God bless you.
Okay.
As our sister was speaking, there was something that came to my mind. My teacher, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, once did a lecture called "The Revelation That Leads to Revolution." And the scripture says, in the beginning was the Word, but it doesn't say in a word. That Word becomes flesh and then dwells among human people. But without the Word first, it never would become flesh. And what we're looking at here is the fact that we're having the discussion lets us know we're in a new time. This kind of meeting 200 years ago, we'd all be dead. If it even were to happen. If we thought it, we'd be afraid to do it. Yeah, we're right by one of the most beautiful areas in Chicago having this meeting here. Not to mention the mixture of different backgrounds of people. This has always been the fear of those who rule, because once we can begin to see, oh, you have that issue? I have that issue too. When did yours start? Well, you know what? Mine started. This is how you trace a virus. You have to go back to find the date where the regeneration and multiplication of it began. And we can do that with all of the condition of all of the original people by their interaction with this philosophy of white supremacy. And when this infected us, all right, now we know it's there. You still need an antibody that will help remove it from our system. That is what we're still lacking. And that's why the Saturday Free School, that's why these kinds of conversations are necessary, because they help, not just, I don't like talking about vaccinate. They help inoculate us so that we're not just responding to the infection, we're getting something in us that may prevent it and drive it out of us. Without that, I can know I have COVID. If I don't know how to treat it, I'm going to suffer some serious consequences. We can acknowledge white supremacy, but if we don't have that which removes it, gets under it, and extracts it from its root, we will continue to reproduce it within ourselves, because 200 years later, we're still in that condition. Nothing has come to remove that from us until a greater truth comes that will remove it.
मैं कुछ अपने धर्म शास्त्रों को कोट करना चाहूंगा। हमारी जो सबसे पवित्र ग्रंथ है हिंदुइज्म का, वो श्रीमद् भगवत गीता है, और उसमें भगवान कृष्ण 18वें अध्याय के सबसे आखिरी श्लोक में कह रहे हैं, यत्र योगीश्वरो कृष्ण पार्थो तत्र धनुर्धर तत्र श्री विरज्योर्भूति ध्रुवा नीतिर मतिर ममा, कि जीत कहाँ की होगी और ये लड़ाई क्या है। तो भगवान कह रहे हैं कि कोई ये नहीं है कि आज ये लड़ाई है। उन्होंने कहा कौरव और पांडव तो एक सिंबॉलिक हैं, जबकि ये लड़ाई जब से सृष्टि बनी है तब से चली आ रही है। ये लड़ाई विचार की लड़ाई है, और ये जो परिवर्तन है ये एक समय में नहीं होता। तो भगवान उसके उदाहरण दे रहे हैं। 4थे अध्याय के पहले श्लोक में ही उन्होंने कहा, सुनो, ये बात ब्रह्मा ने अपने पुत्र को कही थी और उसके पुत्र ने उसको कही थी, और फिर वो एक पूरा सीक्वेंस बनाकर चल रहे हैं। तो मेरा कहने का मतलब ये है कि मैं वो नहीं करूंगा, पर उसमें उन्होंने कहा कि लड़ाई कोई एक दिन की नहीं है और एक दिन में खत्म भी नहीं होने वाली। ये हजारों वर्षों की विचारों की लड़ाई है। और विनोबा जी ने भी इसको इसी बात में कहा, जब गीता पर वचन उन्होंने दिए उसके पहले उसमें कहा कि ये लड़ाई दिमाग की लड़ाई है, विचारों की लड़ाई है, और ये लगातार चलती है। मैं कहूँ, गांधी जी को कोट करना चाहूंगा। गांधी जी ने कहा, इफ यू वांट टू चेंज बी द चेंज। ये गांधी विचार था। मैं अपने एक बहुत बड़े रेवोल्यूशनरी भगत सिंह को कोट करना चाहूंगा। भगत सिंह को जब उनका मुकदमा चल रहा था तो वहां उन्होंने इनकलाब, क्योंकि सोवियत रशिया में इनकलाब हो चुका था रशिया में, और वो उससे बहुत प्रभावित थे। और जब रशियन रेवोल्यूशन की वर्षगांठ का दिन आया तो उनके साथियों ने नारा लगाया, इनकलाब जिंदाबाद, साम्राज्यवाद मुर्दाबाद, लॉन्ग लिव रेवोल्यूशन, डाउन विद इंपीरियलिज्म। तो जज ने पूछा ये इनकलाब क्या है, क्रांति क्या है। भगत सिंह ने कहा कि गोरे अंग्रेज चले जाएं, काले अंग्रेज आकर बैठ जाएं, ये इनकलाब नहीं है। उन्होंने कहा इनकलाब का मतलब है, क्रांति का मतलब है एक सतत प्रक्रिया। जब तक एक्सप्लॉयटेशन है, जब तक इक्वालिटी है, जब तक इनजस्टिस है, ये इनकलाब की धारा चलती रहेगी। और फिर कहा कि इनकलाब का धार तलवार की धार पर नहीं चलता, तेज नहीं होता। इनकलाब की धार विचार की धार पर होती है। मैंने बहुत ज्यादा वर्णन कर दिया पूर्वा को, पर वो थोड़ा सा खूबसूरती से करेंगे।
I will again try to do my very best to answer this, to basically answer the question that Jahan raises about what revolution actually means, whether it's a process, what kind of timeline do you talk about when you talk about a revolutionary process. He turns back to the Hindu religious scriptures and in particular the holy book of the Hindus, which is the Bhagavad Gita. And he quotes certain sections from it, where Lord Krishna, who is basically supposed to be narrating the Gita, talks about this endless struggle that's going on. And it's, I think to paraphrase it, I'd put it like this. So Krishna is asking the question, what is this struggle and who is it for and who will win this fight? He says that this fight is as ageless as creation itself because it's the ideological struggle. And he says that it's not a struggle that you can that's over in a day and it reaches its outcome or resolution in a day, and it goes on as long as there's injustice. And then he basically he's going back to all the great leaders from the Indian tradition who have come, basically who were produced by this tradition. And so he talks about Vinoba Bhave, who was a student of Gandhi, and also he was the spiritual successor of Mahatma Gandhi. And Vinoba Bhave ji also says that the struggle, like Minister Abel was saying, like Dr. Caroline was saying, the struggle, the ideological struggle is the most important. The struggle of the mind, changing the mind, transforming the mind is the most important. And I mean, again, the line that he quotes from Gandhi, which is of the nature that he said, be the change that you want to see in the world. So change starts with you. And then he goes to Bhagat Singh, another great revolutionary leader from the Indian freedom struggle, gave up his life at a very early age. He was 24 when he was executed. During a very publicized court case that Bhagat Singh was, a part of, they used to raise the slogan of long live revolution, down with imperialism. So one time, the judge asked them, what do you mean by revolution? You talk about it so much. What do you mean by it? And Bhagat Singh's answer to that was, by revolution, we don't mean that the white masters go away and the darker masters replace them. Right. What revolution to us means is a constant force that will be present whenever any kind of oppression, be it of inequality, be it of poverty, be it of foreign domination, any kind of oppression, as long as it exists, there will be a revolutionary process. And this process will not be waged with guns or swords, but it will be waged with ideas, with people's minds.
Okay, yes, the Kalapir folks are very gracious with time, so let's letting us have the space, even though we're a little over time. So let's have one more question from Brother Eddie, and perhaps I can ask the panelists also to tie their answer to his question with their closing remarks, please.
Thank you. How's Mike? Good. Everyone's remarks today in the video really impressed upon me the necessity for and relevance of nonviolence today. Whether it's on the international scale, the ruling class of this world is seeking to get us to destroy each other. Even in the domestic scale, amongst each other, different racial groups or different other kind of delineations, the ruling class has gotten us to feel that we are at odds with each other and we should overcome each other instead of working together. And now, especially in this day and age, within our own groups, as has been specified, whether it's black people kill another black people, Mexicans kill another black Mexicans, the ruling class has gotten us to destroy ourselves even. In King's time and Reverend Lawson's time, nonviolence was applied from one group to another, using the power of truth to build unity. How would we frame that and the task of our times, given that we have been positioned to be at odds with each other? How would we formulate the force of truth for us within our own groups to unify, so that we can unify with all groups? Thank you.
Is it okay if I add a
Yeah,
question?
sure.
I think it's related to what I was saying. So, my name is Allison. I'm from the Saturday Free School. Something that came from the documentary that has since stuck in my mind is this concept of being a citizen of a country or nation that has yet to exist. And that has stuck with me because within the free school, we have this saying that we march to achieve our work in the legacies of Martin Luther King Jr. and W.E.B. Du Bois, who marched to achieve our nation. And of course, Brother Abel Muhammad is from the Nation of Islam, and this concept of, can you expound on this concept of a nation? And I think I asked this question because it ties to what Eddie is also saying, which is, what does it mean for different people to come together to, as a nation, as a people, especially in a time when patriotism or is a bad thing, is perceived as a bad thing.
Okay, wait. I want to ask you. No, I'm Serafina, also from the Saturday Free School, and I was reading James Baldwin earlier this morning, and in his essay, it talked to the teachers. He writes about how one or the part of the crisis that America is facing is the crisis of identity. And he says that now if I were a teacher in this school or any Negro school, and I was dealing with Negro children who were in my care only a few hours of every day and would then return to their homes and to the streets, children who have an apprehension of their future, which with every hour grows grimmer and darker, I would try to teach them. I would try to make them know that those streets, those houses, those dangers, those agonies by which they are surrounded are criminal. I would try to make each child know that these things are the result of a criminal conspiracy to destroy him. Mm-hmm. I would teach him that if he intends to get to be a man, he must at once decide that his is stronger than that his force of being a man is stronger than this conspiracy, and that he must never make peace with this crime, and that one of his weapons for refusing to make peace with it and for destroying it depends on what he decides he is worth. And he says that I would teach him that there are currently very few standards in this country which are worth a man's respect, but that it is up to him to change these standards for the sake of the life and health of the country. I would suggest to him that the popular culture as represented, for example, on television and in comic books and in movies, is based on fantasies created by the very ill people, right? And he must be aware that these are fantasies that have nothing to do with reality. I would teach him that the press he reads is not as free as he says it is, and he can do something about that too. I would try to make him know that just as American history is longer, larger, more various, more beautiful, more terrible than anything anyone has ever said about it, so is the world larger, more daring, more beautiful, and more terrible, but principally larger, and that it belongs to him. I would teach him that he doesn't have to be bound by the expediencies of any given administration, by any given policy, any given morality. He has the right and the necessity to examine everything. I would try to show him that one has not learned anything about Castro when one says that he's a communist. This is a way of his not learning something about Castro, something about Cuba, something in time about the world. I would suggest to him that his is living at the moment in an enormous province. America is not the world. And if America was going to become a nation, she must find a way, and this child must help her find a way, to use the tremendous potential and tremendous energy which this child represents. If this country does not find a way to use that energy, it will be destroyed by that energy. There's also something that you pointed out earlier, Brother Abel. And a part of what is so obvious to me about the film and the question of the revolutionary non-violence, meaning really, what are the capabilities and the potentialities of the human being, also said in the TED Talks that Lawson points out, a part of which Alice and Eddie are talking to, is that this country, which belongs to all of us, has to also be concerned as our responsibility. And to use that, to be able to use that understanding, or to get to that understanding, is also part of the struggle for ideological unity. But
I'll say this briefly to try to answer all three of them. You know, the Nation of Islam is not an organization. And when you come visit us, you go through customs. We search you so that no propaganda or paraphernalia from that, because Islam means peace. My teacher, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, said that this will eventually engulf the planet. Peace. So in that, what we call the hereafter, which is while we live, but after the removal of the wicked, we will live in a state of peace. And in that existence, there will be churches, there will be synagogues. Yes. There'll be cloisters, there'll be temples, but the people will be free and not restricted or limited by falsehood. So they'll be able to then work out these things, which all of them, we believe, originate from the one creator of it all, who is the truth. But the human being deviates after messengers and scriptures are sent, and they reinterpret it, and those in power misinterpret it for their benefit and to the detriment of human beings. That's what we're experiencing. Within that, the main tool we believe that is used is that which creates confusion by misidentifying ourselves and our relationship to the Creator. Once that understanding is broken, everything else is going to be offline. Because now within my identity is wrapped my purpose of being. Once I don't know that, now I can be manipulated and easily controlled. Because somebody tells me, oh, you want to know your purpose? Go to my school, where I will restrict what you can learn. Because I want to control a production line that is going to produce ignorant human beings. So it's to my benefit that you don't learn to read. I used to make it illegal on the plantation. Now it's legal, but I make it so that you can pass and not and be illiterate. And then who do I demonize? Cuba, where 98% of the people are literate. We care about you, but you can't have health care. So who do I demonize? Cuba, where everyone gets free health care. I say you deserve an education, but you got to be able to afford it. So now it's like the lottery. Hopefully you can play basketball. Hopefully you can play a sport. So that you can fund your education. Maybe you'll be one of the lucky ones. And then they make us revolve around the idea that, you know, allowing the student to have their debt relieved is a big thing. Well, most of our people don't go to college anyway, so that doesn't affect the majority of us. Black, brown, red, yellow, or white. We're not in those universities. So it's affecting a very small percentage, but they hold it up as if it's some marvelous thing. In Cuba, there's a free education, by the way. So you see this system that they have where they demonize that which they claim to be about, but they never instituted, and the masses of the people, because we don't know who we are, we don't know what we deserve. We think we're a nationality. Those are borders made by human beings. The ultimate aim of the human being is to be a reflection of the divinity, that power, that force that brought us into existence, not by chance, but with a specified purpose. If our education doesn't allow us to find that purpose and then fulfill that purpose, it's worthless. If our religion doesn't allow us to see the sanctity of this, preserve it and learn how to live it, then that religion is worthless, regardless of whose name we put on it. And if the nationality, the nation name that we attach ourselves to does not lead to the promotion and the elevation of human beings so that they could live with one another in peace, then that government is worthless as well. And the problem is, America is a baked cake. I heard the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan say this once. And we're trying to fix the recipe after the cake's been in the oven for 2 hours. We're not about violent revolution by any means. But we know we can't fix this system. So God is giving us a better system. We don't have to fight one system. All we have to do, and we're free to do it, let's go live what we know is right. Now, if they come to try to stop that, that's a different situation. But if I'm not bothering anyone, if I'm not breaking your laws, if I'm not violating your laws, and I'm living free, justified, and equal in a way that I believe and can prove is for the benefit of myself, my people, and human beings in general, then if you come against that, there's another force that you represent that I have to counter. And that is a force that we call, from a spiritual perspective, devil or Satan. As human beings, we would call it tyrants. We would call it authoritarians. Because God is not forcing any of us to accept this. He permits us to choose as an example of how real leadership should function. And how will you and I know that except that we are trained up and educated in a way that teaches us to serve one another and not just a few elite people. That's our real identity, is just to be good human beings.
No, I haven't, and I just want to thank the organizers. Putting this wonderful document. But I hope everybody will sign up and join with the Saturday Free School here in Chicago. And next year, which is the 100th anniversary of the birth of James Baldwin, here in Chicago and in Philadelphia and other parts of the country, we're organizing a whole year of James Baldwin. And we're calling it James Baldwin, God's Revolutionary Voice.
जो 3 सवाल आए, मैं उन पर अपनी बात कहना चाहूंगा। गांधी जी के 3 कोटेशंस, कि अगर आंख के बदले आंख निकाल ली जाएगी, आंख के बदले आंख ली जाएगी, तो सारी दुनिया अंधी हो जाएगी। दूसरा उन्होंने कहा कि अंग्रेज भले ही हमारे देश में रहें, पर अंग्रेजियत चली जाए। अंग्रेजियत का मतलब गुलाम करने की प्रवृत्ति चली जाए। गांधी जी ने तीसरा कहा कि मैं ऐसी दुनिया में नहीं रहना चाहता जहां हिंसा हो, जहां वायलेंस हो। हमारे धर्मशास्त्रों में धर्म के कई लक्षण बताए हैं। सच बोलना बड़ा लक्षण है, और यहां तक कि गांधी ने तो कहा है कि सत्य ही ईश्वर है। पर सबसे बड़ा उन्होंने कहा अहिंसा परमो धर्म, कि अहिंसा जो है वो सबसे बड़ा धर्म। और फिर जो कहा कि वसुधैव कुटुंबकम, इस सारी दुनिया हमारा घर है। ये दीवारें हमने खींची हैं। ये मुल्क है, जैसे कि आपने कहा कि किस तरह से हम नेशन बना लेते हैं। अगर धर्म के नाम पर नेशन बनता तो अंग्रेजों ने हमारा 1947 में पार्टीशन किया, धर्म के नाम पर किया, 2 नेशन थ्योरी के नाम पर किया। पर क्या हुआ? जो देश धर्म के नाम पर बने थे 1971 में भाषा के नाम पर टूट गए। तो मैं समझता हूं कि पूरे देश, पूरी दुनिया के अंदर लोग अलग अलग तरह से बात कहते हैं। एकम सद विप्र बहुधा वदन्ति, सत्य तो एक ही है, लोग उसको अलग अलग ढंग से कहते हैं। मैं एक कोट जवाहरलाल नेहरू का देना चाहूंगा। जवाहरलाल नेहरू जहां भी जाते तो लोग कहते भारत माता की जय। वो खड़े हो जाते और कहते हुई भारत माता। भारत माता क्या है? तो लोग कहते हैं पहाड़ हैं, नदियां हैं, पेड़ हैं, यानी कहते नो, भारत माता इस देश के लोग हैं, भारत माता एक विचार है, जो विचार किसी भी सीमाओं में बंद कर नहीं है। एक सवाल आया कि हम बच्चों को किस तरह से सिखाएं। मैं आपको ये आह्वान करना चाहूंगा और अपना तजुर्बा भी कहना चाहूंगा। हम एक स्कूल चलाते हैं, छोटा सा, बहुत छोटा सा स्कूल, जिसमें हमारे पास 250 बच्चे हैं। एक नई तरह की एजुकेशन, एक इंसान बनाने की एजुकेशन करने का काम हम लोग कर रहे हैं और हमें उसका बड़ा सार्थक उसका असर है। तो हम सब उस भावना से जुड़े तो निश्चित रूप से एक बहुत बड़ा काम हम कर पाएंगे।
Thank you, Ramonji. So, Ramonji is responding to all three questions to some extent, and he starts with quoting Gandhi, and he mentions three things that Gandhi used to say. The first is about violence, where Gandhi would say that an eye for an eye would make the whole world blind. And then the second thing is what Gandhi thought about nationhood, where he would say that he didn't even care if the English stayed in India, but he cared that Englishness had to leave India. And by Englishness, he meant the intention to oppress and dominate and subjugate people. And the third thing that he mentions is what Gandhi would always say, is that he does not want to live in a world where violence is the norm. And in fact, he would say two things. He would say, well, the Indian tradition is based on a deep respect and search for the truth. And to Gandhi, truth was God, and non-violence was man's greatest religion. And we also have in the Indian tradition, Ramoji says, we also think of the whole world as our neighbor, to be treated as just like how we treat ourselves, we treat our family. Then he talks about the idea of nations that are based on or thought to be based only in religions. And he says that the English tried to do this to India, where they divided. They had the two-nation theory, that there are two nations in India, one Muslim and one Hindu, and they partitioned the country on the basis of that. But then the two countries that were built, one of the countries that was built as a separate country, representing a separate religion, broke up into Bangladesh and Pakistan on the basis of language and culture and all of that. So it shows the contradiction in that kind of thinking. And then she says that all of this goes on to show that there's one truth in this idea of non-violence, one truth in this idea of what makes a nation, and to demonstrate that and this is an anecdote that's also one of my favorites, where he's talking about Nehru, how Nehru used to travel far and wide. Nehru is the first Prime Minister of India. He used to travel far and wide in India, talking to the Indian people, to the peasantry. And, the people would always raise the slogan, "Long live Mother India." India, personified as a mother. And Nehru would ask them, what do you mean? What is Mother India? What do you mean when you say Mother India? And then people would say, oh, the rivers of India, the mountains. But he would say, no, that's not Mother India. Mother India is the people. It's the people what they represent. It's the idea that the people represent. And that is basically what Mother India is. And that is what India's contribution is going to be. So, I forgot the last part, which was to Serafina's question of how do you teach children about the world they're coming into and the world that there is their future and their inheritance. And Ramohanji actually in Panipat, he runs a school of it's a small school of about 250 children, but it's a new type of education that these children are being given, where more than formal, the subject-wise classes, they're being taught to be human says that this is a philosophy that basically going back to that idea that the change has to be in the mind. A new type of education for children also is required for our parents.
Okay, well, I definitely agree with Doc that these crucial conversations must continue, and I hope that all of you will join us as we, in our future events, to continue these discussions. I would just like to finish by thanking everyone. Thank you very much to our wonderful roundtable participants. Thank you, thank you very much to the audience for joining us, and also allow you. Thank you for staying. Thank you to Kalapriya, especially Mriduji and Ms. Carey. Lastly, I would just like to end by saying, some of you may know that at McCormick Place there's a World Parliament of Religions happening, but I feel that our evening tonight was a World Parliament of Religions for the future and for the future.